Hello, this is Rick. In this episode of Demystifying Dallas 1963, we look at the evidence against Lee Harvey Oswald. Conspiracy writers have gone to great lengths to try to prove that Oswald could not have been the assassin or the only conspirator. Of course, the great majority of people, even conspiracy writers, have conceded that, well, yes, Oswald must have been one of the gunmen. So great was the evidence against him. But then they go on to say that he must have been just one of several gunmen and one of perhaps many conspirators. And I think this is where so many writers go off the rails in terms of rationality. Let's look at the items of evidence and see how many of them point to Oswald, not only as one of the gunmen that killed JFK, but as the only assassin. First, Oswald wrote in his diary that he hated everything to do with the United States and every representative of the government. He even wrote a letter to his brother in which he included his brother among the people that Oswald said he would be glad to shoot because they represent the United States. His brother was a member of the Marines. And he said that he would take violent action against any representative of the U.S. government. Some say that Oswald often had kind things to say about JFK. But even though that may be true, these comments in his diary suggest that for Oswald, perhaps the assassination simply was nothing personal. Second, Oswald tried to assassinate General Edwin Walker in April 1963, and he came within literally a hair's breadth of succeeding. Do criminal suspects accused of an assassination, who have already tried to carry out an assassination, often turn out to be not guilty? And Oswald acted alone when he carried out the attack on General Walker, as he said to his wife and made abundantly clear. Third, Oswald's political ambitions were exhausted when he returned in October 1963, just 7 weeks before the assassination. He had been turned down in Mexico City by both the Russians and the Cubans. His wife, when he returned, was happy living with Ruth Paine. He had no job, and in October, Ruth Paine got him the job at the Texas School Book Depository. The FBI was still on his trail, and he had no prospects for the future. Does this sound like a man who would have turned a blind eye to the news of a presidential motorcade that would pass right in front of the place where he had gotten a job just a month before? Fourth, Oswald asked his co-worker, Buell Frazier, for a ride home on Thursday, November 21st, which Oswald had never done before. Oswald had always returned to Irving with Frazier on a Friday. But on November 21st, he broke that pattern, and he asked Frazier if he could go home to Irving with him to visit his wife on a Thursday. Frazier asked Oswald why, and Oswald said he wanted to get curtain rods. This raises the question, did Oswald, whose room at his rooming house already had curtain rods, suddenly become interested in interior decorating and wanted a different kind of curtain rod for his rooms? Or was the fact that this was November 21st and the motorcade was going to pass by his building the next morning have more to do with Oswald's request to Frazier that he go back to Irving, where his rifle was located in Ruth Paine's garage? Oswald could have told Frazier that he wanted to go home to Irving to see his wife, and Frazier would have accepted that, of course. But he used the curtain rod story, which is patently ridiculous on its face, because he needed to explain why he had a package full of something when he returned to the Texas School Book Depository with Frazier on the morning of November 22nd. And he probably thought he could get away with that kind of an excuse with the very agreeable Frazier, and he turned out to be correct. Fifth, Oswald carried a brown bag to Frazier's car on the morning of November 22nd. Frazier saw the bag, and even Frazier's sister saw the bag, and they estimated that it was about 24 inches in length. Frazier saw Oswald carry the bag into the depository building with him that morning. But no curtain rods were found at the Texas School Book Depository after the assassination. A rifle purchased by Oswald earlier in the year was in the building after the assassination, as was a brown bag at the location of the sniper's perch on the 6th floor of the building. We know Oswald was in the building that morning, and we know his rifle was there. Isn't it logical that Oswald would have brought this rifle into the building and that the rifle represented the contents of the brown bag that brought him out to Irving the day before? Next, Oswald had stored the rifle in Irving, as I said, Ruth Payne's garage. Ruth Payne noticed on the evening of November 21st that someone had been in the garage late that night. She assumed that Oswald had been in there for some reason that she did not know. The next day, the blanket covering the rifle was empty. There was no rifle under the blanket, and that's where the rifle had been stored. The rifle was gone, and the only explanation is that Oswald had dismantled it, put it in a paper bag that was jerry-rigged to contain it, and that was the bag that Frazier and his sister Lily Mae Randall saw on the morning of November 22nd. When Oswald was interrogated by the police later on November 22nd, he denied he carried a bag into the building, other than his lunch, even though the bag was at least 24 inches long. So essentially, Oswald was saying that Frazier was lying, as was his sister. Does this sound like Frazier? Frazier was not only affable, but he was always ethical, and it beggars belief that he would lie. Was Frazier's sister lying as well? Eighth, Oswald was seen on various floors in the Texas School Book Depository on the morning of November 22nd. Evidently, he was on the move. The last floor he was spotted on before the assassination was the 6th floor from whence the shots were fired that killed President Kennedy. The clipboard containing his orders, dated November 22nd, contained no orders at all when it was found between some boxes on December 4th. What was the ever-mobile Oswald doing on the 6th floor? Next, Oswald, who was probably the most politically interested occupant of the building, had no alibi for his whereabouts at 12:30 p.m. at the time of the assassination. He told police that he was eating lunch at the time, and when they asked him if he was eating alone, he said no, he ate with Junior Jarman, a colleague of his. But Junior Jarman denied eating lunch with Oswald, and in fact Jarman is seen on photographs taken of the Texas School Book Depository at 12:30 p.m., the time of the assassination. So he could not have been with Oswald, and that was a provable and proven lie, for no other purpose than to invent an alibi that Oswald did not have. Oswald, the defector to the Soviet Union, the man who said he would become prime minister of some great country in 20 years, said he preferred to eat alone or to eat with a colleague rather than see the leader of the free world pass by the building in which he worked. Next, Oswald proceeded to tell the police a series of provable lies. For example, he said he left the Texas School Book Depository immediately after the assassination, the only employee to do that, because he said he just assumed that there would be no more work that afternoon. Apparently, this politically interested individual had no interest in finding out what had happened to the President of the United States outside his own office building. When the police asked him why he had a pistol on him at the time of his arrest, he said, well, young men just like to carry pistols around. But of course we know that Oswald raced into his rooming house to get his pistol and raced out almost as quickly as he entered. When confronted with the backyard photographs, which showed him holding his rifle and his pistol and radical publications in the other hand, Oswald at first denied that they were legitimate. He said that they were faked. The only problem was that there were other copies of this, and many of the copies were signed by Oswald himself, and some were signed by Marina too, and of course Marina testified that she took the pictures. So much for being faked. Shall we go on? When Marina met with Oswald on Saturday, November 23rd, he told her he was being well treated and that she shouldn't worry. He mainly talked about how it was so important that she use some of the money he left her to buy shoes for their newly born child. Oswald also called Ruth Payne when he was unable to reach Marina on Saturday and asked Ruth Payne in a very calm, measured way to try to get an attorney for him. It was like he was being held for a minor traffic accident. Ruth Payne was aghast. He never told her he was being framed by the police or that an outrageous thing was happening to him. Were these the acts of an innocent man? When Oswald left Ruth Payne's house on the morning of November 22nd, he left his wedding ring and virtually all the money he had, more than $100, behind for Marina, indicating some momentous decision, obviously. He left no note, which might have been expected if this was just a dramatic action signaling the end of a marriage. When Oswald ran out of excuses for such things as the backyard photographs, which were difficult to explain, he simply refused to talk further about them. He refused, for example, to talk about why he had in his wallet an ID for both Oswald and A.H. Heidel, each ID having the exact same picture on it, that is, Oswald's picture. This was hard to explain by Oswald because Heidel had purchased the mail-order rifle. Obviously, Heidel was a pseudonym that Oswald had created so that he was not linked to the rifle, and there was no clear or logical explanation for some innocent reason why he would have Heidel's ID with his picture on it in his wallet, unless it was a pseudonym. So Oswald didn't want to talk about that, and when he was confronted with his wallet, he simply refused to talk about it. If a suspect was being framed by having a wallet placed upon him, or said to be placed upon him, with Heidel's fake ID in it, and Oswald had no knowledge of it, wouldn't he have wanted to talk about it at great length? If he was innocent, yes. Just before he was led down to the basement of his Dallas jail for transfer to another jail on the morning of November 24th, 1963, Oswald trapped himself in a fatal lie, perhaps the most important lie of his interrogation that weekend. He said that when he heard the shots, he came down from the 6th floor to the 2nd. Now that part was true, but it contradicted what he said on the day of his arrest, when he said he was eating lunch in the 2nd floor lunchroom at the time of the assassination. He therefore placed himself on the floor where the shots had been fired at the time when the assassination occurred. This contradiction of what he had said earlier about eating lunch with Junior Jarman would surely have come up at the trial and be a major item of evidence indicting Oswald. But of course the public did not hear about this because of the greater news that Oswald was shot moments later. And so moments later Oswald was dead. But his lies continue to live on to testify to his guilt for anyone who is open to hearing them. Thanks for watching this video. Bye-bye.